50 years ago, this month, was the Cuban Missile Crisis. You guys know anything about that? Have you studied that and read about that? I'm sorry?
We haven't studied it.
You haven't studied it. It was, pardon me, it was hairy. As I told you, I'm an Air Force brat. I was raised in the Air Force. And I was there. We were stationed at Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi. Mississippi's not too far from Cuba. And we were a tanker squadron with, we had bombers as well, B-52s, and we had tankers. And down at the end of our runway was an alert shack. And there was always 2 or 3 bombers and 2 or 3 tankers that were manned 24 hours a day in that alert shack. And they could launch in 5 or 6, 7 minutes. They could be in the air. And that was the old days of the Cold War. They don't do that anymore, but things were very, very tense. I knew something was wrong. I was in the 7th or 8th grade, coming back on the base, because the school was outside base perimeter, coming back to the base, and the air police stopped the bus. They'd never done that. And then they came on board and they checked every single one of our ID cards, or our dog tags. Well, I had dog tags too. They'd never done that either. I thought, well, this is some kind of strange alert. As we pulled on to the base, then I began to understand. The 82nd Airborne was pitching tents on the golf course and across the medians. When we got to our bus stop was the Officers Club parking lot. As we got there, you could see the flight line, and it was completely blacked out with attack fighters, with 101 Voodoos and F-4 Phantoms. And all of them were carrying racks, well, F-105 Thunder Chiefs. They all had racks on the wings, and the wings were all loaded with bombs, with munitions. We were that close to going. And because this is the 50-year anniversary of that, there's been a lot of coverage about it. And it turns out, no surprise to me, the Air Force wanted to go. They wanted to go, let's sink Cuba. Let's just sink them, because they had Soviet missiles in Cuba. Let's just treat it like a big ship and just sink the whole island. Because it had recently gone communist, and the military was really unhappy about that. And it was John Kennedy who was the sole voice that said, no, we're going to wait, we're going to work our way through this. And I think we will probably never know how close we came to thermonuclear war in those days of October. Looking back even further, that one didn't scare me as badly as the first one. The first one was 1956, I was 7, it was the Suez Canal crisis. And that one really scared me in a very personal way. What had happened was the president of Egypt had nationalized the Suez Canal. And he made it Egyptian. Well, the English and the French had paid for it. They built that canal. They weren't going to give it up. And so they dispatched their fleets to Egypt to go get the control of the canal back. Soviet Union was the biggest supporter of Egypt. Soviet Union said, no, if you go for that, we're going to take out England and France. Well, then it came down to Dwight Eisenhower, President of the United States, and he said, no, I don't think so. If you attack England and France, you attack the United States of America. And we went on war alert. And what scared me the worst, I was a 7-year-old kid. My dad awakened my sister and I. And I've seen him in his flight suit all my life. That wasn't a big deal. But for the only time I knew him, he had his .45 in his shoulder holster. He never worn that at home. And he woke us up and he said, guys, I want you to get up, I want you to pack one bag, I want you to get your stuff together and leave the living room, we're leaving in a few minutes. And the way he said it, his tone of voice, it was loving, it was supportive, but it was also, here we go. It's on. And we got up and we put some stuff in close. And I'll never forget the Greyhound bus station as the entire squadron was there, getting wives and kids on buses to get away from a primary nuclear target. And that's what Roswell, Walker Air Force Base in Roswell, New Mexico was. We're the home of the 509th Air Bombardment Wing. That was a primary nuclear target. And what they were doing, they were getting the families away from there because they knew the heat was coming. We were That's the closest I personally came, and it scared me, and I can remember it with absolute clarity now. Growing up in the Air Force, those guys were all bigger than life. It's like, have you seen the movies based on the astronauts, the original astronauts? The Right Stuff? Those guys who flew the Mercury missions. They were the best pilots the military had to offer. That's what these guys that I grew up with were. They were the best pilots. They were the survivors. A lot of birds went in. One of the most famous was a guy named Stinchcomb. Stinchcomb was a character. I never knew his first name. He was always just Captain Stinchcomb. Air Force loved Stinchcomb. First of all, he was a hot pilot. World War II veteran, Korean War veteran, hot pilot. And he crash landed a T-33 jet trainer. It was on fire. I don't know what happened, but he got it down. And he got out of the aircraft, and he was okay. But the rear seater didn't get out, and the plane was on fire. So Stinchcomb went back into the flames to get his guy out, reaching in and undoing the safety belts and pulling him out. His hands were pretty much okay. The flight gloves burned to his skin, and when they got that dealt with, he had like real shiny hands, but his hands were basically okay. His face, I can't describe it. It just looked like a burned potato. His face was just gnarled with scar tissue. But the Air Force loved this guy. And he was sort of like Coyote is in Native American stories. He was always into something. There's a famous story about Stinchcomb, the Officers Club in Tula Greenland or Goose Bay Labrador. It's been too long, I don't remember. Where we had a rivalry with fighter pilots. They always thought they were the toughest guys, and the tankers always thought that we were the toughest guys. So Dad said he walked in the Officers Club, and there was a big crowd gathered around. He went over and he looked, and there was Stinchcomb, and he was having a hand-squeezing contest with one of the fighter pilots. And the fighter pilot was down on his knees crying, and Stinchcomb was sitting there with a drink in his hand, having a talk over with the guys who wouldn't let go of it. So